So my name is Jonathan Thomas. I'm an artist. I use oil painting as my medium. I'm 33 years old, and I live in Columbus, Ohio. The first time that I probably really got tuned into art was during a field trip when I was a kindergartner. It was the first field trip I ever went on to. It was to the Columbus Museum of Art. When I went in there, I saw a piece of artwork. It's one of the first things to tour with my teacher. And I was kind of confused as to who actually made this. My teacher said an artist. And so we continued to go through the museum and, I'm seeing all these different works that are different from different artists. And I think that's where I got the bug. That's where it kind of stuck for me. It's like, okay, this is what art is. This is what I want to do. But I never went to art school or anything like that. It was always around. My family had always got me pens, paper, to draw, but as a kid you don't really kind of have the kind of mindset to you got to do this every day. And it took a life of experiences, working jobs that I didn't like, to really kind of circle back to what it was that I wanted to do in my heart of hearts. And it was just to be an artist. And I like using oil paint. Some people are like, well, why don't you use acrylic? Look, when I wanted to paint, I just did oil paint. You look in the books, you see, all the greats. Back in the day, there was no acrylic. They were mixing these paints. So using oil paint as my medium, I feel like it ties me into that long line of artists that lived on the planet. Because, I'll be standing in front of the canvas and mixing that paintbrush in that paint and putting it on the canvas. And there was another human that did the same thing too, that stood in front of a canvas with a paintbrush, with oil paint, and was just making their ideas come to life. That's tight to me. That's really tight. That's why I like using oil paint, just for that. It brings in an element too of being patient, because unlike a photograph where everything's already kind of finished, with painting, and why I like it so much is that you have to add more color and more layers to these things, to these works, to bring it to life. So when I started on this piece, it was just, black lines. And the black lines, you got the idea of oh, okay, I can see these kind of shapes and forms here. But it's once you start adding those colors and those layers of colors and shading and the relationships and contrast between light and dark, it comes to life, and it's really, really cool. I use the float tank. I haven't used a float tank in a while.
Really?
Yeah, the float tank. It was cool because I got to rest my entire body, and not have to do the gravity thing I'm standing up. It's just, you can just float in there. That float tank's really good. I haven't used it in such a long time. Any kind of yoga is all about just that union and bringing that, you've got a mind, you've got a body, but you think they're related, you think they're kind of held together, but as you really start to dive down the rabbit hole, you see that they aren't. And so these practices, especially with Ashtanga, that repetition and that consistency of working at something, it's akin to a painting. There's about 6 different levels to this style of yoga. I'm somebody that I got to do it all. So I'm going to figure out a way to do all 6. But it's patience, There's times okay, you're not there yet, but you're able to tap into that reality that there's something that you want to achieve, and you can see it through. Even with a painting, I'm able to take something that's a line drawing, that's a rough idea, and be able to see that through to a finished painting, which, it all kind of rolls together. When I was at OSU, I took a class and we had read this book, and it was called The Artist's Way. One of the points that they were talking about is that stigma of the artist is just some kind of guy that just is drunk or is definitely not in their body. They're spaced out on some kind of drugs or whatever. That's just total BS. I mean, you really have to think about, for me, I have to think about, my body's a tool. Everything is an extension of myself. So my body is the number one tool that I need to, if I want to make art, make art. So with that being said, I have to incorporate all these different practices and modalities to make this whole unit whole. Art is all encompassing for me. And when I put this piece together, it was very exhausting. In one day, I, got probably 55 to 65% of the painting done. And I'll tell you what, I was exhausted, but I could only imagine if I was in a state where my body was not in sync with my mind and they weren't communicating on the same level. The more, my mind already vibrates at a very high kind of in the clouds level. So if you can take that and have your body come up to match that, I mean, think about what's going on. There's just like thunder and lightning going on the whole time. And for me, that's important as an artist because I just want to be fine-tuning all the things that I'm putting together. You know, like if I got an idea, I want to be able to think clearly and think that idea all the way through. You know what? Finito. I'm done. I'm not even going to play around with it. That's done. I'm done with this band. We're done. Yeah, they're fun. Yeah, it is awesome. Huh? Thank you. Yeah.